top stories, Ethiopia's permanent envoy dismisses the report of the ICHRI as more of a political statement than a human rights investigation. And TPLF choking Tigray with unconstitutional laws against Tigrayans. Hello and thank you for joining us. You're watching Addis News Hour with the news. I'm Tabitha John. Do stay with us. Ethiopia's permanent representative to the UN in Geneva dismissed the report of the International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia, ICHRI, as more of a political statement than a human rights investigation. Speaking from Geneva, Switzerland, Ambassador Zennebe Kebede said the report is a document with an ill-intended motive on the part of the experts. Goshuma Lissau takes it from here.
The establishment of the International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia was therefore politically motivated. Following the release of the report, the government of Ethiopia has submitted a list of 100 main observations on the draft report and sent it to the President of Human Rights Council to be distributed to members of the Council. The ambassador hinted that the Western powers were concocting to suggest genocide and use humanitarian aid as an instrument of war in the joint investigation. Speaking from Geneva, Switzerland, Ambassador Zennebe Kebede said the report is a document with an ill-intended move on the part of the experts.
It was politically motivated. Commission of Human Rights Experts said they have contacted a TPLF, and what we can understand from that is they simply received a dictation from the TPLF and put their report as an investigation. Rather, it was a political statement. From the outset, Ethiopia had opposed a resolution establishing the Experts Commission on Ethiopia last December 2021. This was because the establishment of the International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia was totally politically motivated.
Explaining why the government opposed the formation of the commission from the outset, Ambassador Zennebe explained that it was established to repeat what has already been done by the joint investigation report of the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission and the Office of United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights into alleged human rights violation.
The findings of the joint investigation team were submitted to the Human Rights Council in Geneva, and the Council also endorsed it unanimously without any reservation, as well as without any precondition. Recommendation of the JIT was finally submitted to the government of Ethiopia to conduct a criminal investigation and ensure accountability. The government accordingly established the Inter-Ministerial Task Force tasked with the implementation of the recommendations by the Joint Investigation Team. So all the investigations have been done by the JIT in a very full-fledged way. The establishment of the International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia was therefore politically motivated.
The ambassador finally called on the international community to act based on principles, international rules, and stop meddling into the internal affairs of Ethiopia. The international community should stop undue pressure against Ethiopia, supporting the TPLF, and stand by the government of Ethiopia. This government is illegitimate, fully supported and elected by the people, he pointed out.
Minister of Foreign Affairs Demeqe Mekonnen met with Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, the United Arab Emirates Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, on the sidelines of UN General Assembly 77 in New York. Demek emphasized that in order to further develop outcomes that are mutually advantageous, the two nations' relations should be scaled up. Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan acknowledged the opportunity for the two nations to strengthen their commercial and investment ties. For his part, Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan noted the potential of the two countries to cement ties in trade and investment. The report released by the UN Human Rights Experts Commission misrepresents Ethiopia's National Defense Force as it is unsubstantiated and incoherent. The TPLF has been busy tarnishing the image of the defense forces together with its Western media outlets. The report itself is self-contradictory and biased, failing to pay any attention to the atrocities committed in Afar and Amhara regions, but solely focusing on Tigray. For more on that, here is Gushu Meliso.
The Ethiopian National Defense Force is well known for its peacekeeping mission in East Africa region and elsewhere in the world. Ethiopia has also been an ambassador of peace in East Africa. Branded for not kicking off any invasion of the territories of neighboring countries, Ethiopia has played considerable diplomatic and peacekeeping roles to ensure peace in the region. However, the terrorist TPLF has been busy tarnishing the image of this indomitable national defense force with its Western courts and media allies. In November 2020, the traitor TPLF backstabbed the National Defense Force, which safeguarded Tigray over 2 decades. In its divide-and-rule system, the group tried to put into ethnic line, but the National Defense Force remains stand to save its nation from invaders and aggressors. So far, the Defense Force is battling with the Trojan Horse TPLF and mercenaries in various fronts. The terrorist TPLF has committed unspeakable atrocities on members of the National Defense Forces and civilians. The International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia report is agenda-driven and did not meet the UN investigation system and standards. According to the Interministerial Task Force to oversee human rights violations in northern Ethiopia, the report is not commensurate with the extent and the magnitude of the damage that have occurred in all the 3 regions, and it only shows a summary picture of the process, lacking impartiality and conducted in a way that puts the neutrality of the organization in jeopardy. The report is meant to discredit the National Defense Forces, Ethiopia's pride, and help the TPLF dodge accountability.
Families who lost their loved ones during the China massacre by the terrorist TPLF recounted heart-wrenching stories when approached by ETV. Residents of North Gondar zone in the state of Amhara portrayed the brutal killing of civilians during the aggression by the terrorist TPLF. It is to be recalled that the terrorist TPLF slaughtered over 200 civilians at China in August 2021. Shagao Yamato has the details.
Maria Ba is a resident of North Gondar Zone, Chena district. During the TPLF's aggression in August 2021, her husband and 2 children fell victims to the brutal carnage unleashed by Tigrayan invading force. Maria is still in a deep grief.
Dying in action may not be as shocking since it's a daring act, but we are talking here about unarmed, defenseless innocents falling victims to a brutal aggressor. The Tigrayan invading forces robbed out such people as priests and farmers. The level of savagery is indescribable.
Those who survived the brutal carnage have a lot more to recount. One such survivor is Balata Mogas, who witnessed the attack targeting Chena Takla Haymanos Church. Such programs and services as mass, prayer and healing came to a grinding halt after the attack.
The faithful were deeply saddened by the deaths of the priests, but they showed such admirable resolve to press ahead with church services. There is no mass service right now, and the graveyard is full to its brim.
These shocking atrocities unleashed by the Tigrayan invading force did not receive the attention they truly deserved in the trumped-up report by the international experts of human rights on Ethiopia. This attests to the fact that TPLF's Western courts will leave no stone unturned to help it dodge accountability.
The people of Tigray have been witnessing all sorts of shocking rights violations at the hands of the TPLF following the withdrawal of the Ethiopian Defense Forces. Bent on dismembering the unity of the country at any cost, the TPLF has been making military preparations for more than 2 years. Talking to the Deutsche Welle, director of the Balzali School of International Affairs and professor of international security, Anne Fitzgerald, disclosed that the TPLF is holding the people of Tigray as hostages in an apparent attempt to win international attention. Johannes Fentahun has the following account.
Professor Anne Fitzgerald, who has done extensive research on the issue, said the terrorist TPLF passed an unconstitutional law in its tightly controlled territory of Tigray to help facilitate its terrorist activities. All this, according to Gerald, is happening at the expense of the people of Tigray. The professor, who conducted research by talking to citizens in various refugee camps and areas of Tigray, said that the people she talked to said that their lives are under threat.
Yes, at this camp in Jara, there were civilians of all different backgrounds. Those who had worked with the government shared with me the fact that their lives were under threat.
After brutally assaulting a federal army barrack in Mekelle back in November 2020, the TPLF retreated to the arid mountains of Temben up in the central Tigray. Members of this mafia group took shelter among the people, forcing residents to hide them and making it too daunting for the federal government to apprehend them. When the federal government declared a unilateral ceasefire in the hope of helping residents get a respite from the war, the TPLF rather maliciously used the situation for yet another round of warmongering. Following this, the group that returned to Mekelle from Temben Desert is said to have enacted a new dictatorial law on the people of Tigray.
There were new unconstitutional laws that were adopted immediately after the leaders came back from the Tembian region where they had been previously surrounded before the unilateral ceasefire was declared, because the war wasn't going anywhere, because civilians were being used. That's the characteristics of an insurgency, and the risk of civilian casualties was too high. The feedback that I received from both IDP camps was very definitive in saying that unconstitutional laws were introduced to incriminate anyone who had cooperated with, in any way, communicated with the federal government authorities.
It is the hope of many Ethiopians that the terrorist group, which is on a killing spree and on a downright path forcing its Western allies, will be disarmed by the strenuous and patriotic efforts of the Ethiopian Defense Forces.
ገበሬው ማረስ አለበት፣ አስተማሪው ማስተማር አለበት፣ ነጋዴው መነገድ አለበት፣ ወታደር አገሩን መጠበቅ አለበት እንጂ ሁሉም ነገር ወደ አንድ ዳይሬክሽን ብቻ እንዲሄድ ካደረግን እንደ ሀገር መቆም አንችልም። ዘንድሮ ስንዴ ምንም ጥርጥር የለውም ኢትዮጵያ ኤክስፖርት አደርጋለች። መስራት ከቻል መብላት ከቻል መላክ ከቻል በተቃራኒ ያለው መራብ ከጠፋ ማስገባት ከቀነሰ መሰደድ ከቀረ በኢትዮጵያን ሉዓላዊነት ላይ በኢትዮጵያን ክብር ላይ በኢትዮጵያን አንድነት ላይ ቀጥተኛ የሆነ ኢምፓክት አለው።
Welcome back. The Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, EHRC, has advised the International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia, ICHRI, to adequately cover all affected populations and regions to fairly illustrate the situation in northern Ethiopia. In its report published on September 19, 2022, ICHRI has admitted that it confined its investigation to Tigray and Amhara regions. The report also stated that remote investigation was carried out by the ICHRI in the case of Tigray and excluded the Afar region. Both Amhara and Afar regions were invaded by the terrorist TPLF. According to a statement issued by the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission, it underscored the need to exercise caution in the approach which completely disregards the situation in an entire region in northern Ethiopia and advised ICHRI to adequately cover all affected populations and regions to fairly illustrate the situation in northern Ethiopia. It was noted that the EHRC further carried out extensive investigations on Afar and Amhara regions, on the humanitarian situation and airstrikes in Tigray, and arbitrary detentions under the state of emergency in Ethiopia, covering the period between June 2021 and March 2022. Some of the statements in the report of the International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia, ICHRI, which was set up without the agreement on the Ethiopian side, are unfair. House Foreign Relations and Peace Affairs Standing Committee Chairperson Dima Nego told European Union members of Parliament today. The chairperson made the remark during the discussion held between European Union members of Parliament and Ethiopian Parliament Foreign Relations and Peace Affairs Standing Committee members. The EU Parliament delegation, led by Foreign Affairs Committee Chairperson David McAllister and drawn from various standing committees, including Women's Rights and Gender Equality Development, took part in the discussion. Dima Nego recalled that the Ethiopian Human Rights Commission and the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights jointly did an investigation on the ground up to a certain point during the first round of the conflict in the northern part of the country, and they came up with a lot of recommendations. And the government of Ethiopia accepted those recommendations and even set up an interministerial committee to implement the recommendations of this report, the chairperson noted. In business news, Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Affairs Minister Demeke Mekonnen met with Inger Anderson, Executive Director of the UN Environment Programme in New York today, to talk about Ethiopia's Green Legacy Initiative and the development of renewable energy in the nation. Mekonnen brought up during the meeting that Ethiopia is making efforts to combat climate change and places special emphasis on developing a green economy, stressing the benefits of the Green Legacy Initiative in this area for both Ethiopia and its neighbors. Mekonnen also said that the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam as an illustration of a renewable energy development project, emphasizing that it will also benefit other riparian countries besides Ethiopia. Mekonnen also spoke with UN High Commissioner for Refugees, Filippo Grandi. The Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister commended the UN for aiding refugees and pleaded with the Commissioner to expand aid for internally displaced people, IDPs, who were compelled to quit their homes because of conflict and drought. The production of insulating blankets for the Boeing 737 has officially begun between Ethiopian Airlines and the Italian business Geven Skytechno. It was discovered that the aerospace manufacturing facility costs more than $6 million. Ethiopian Group CEO Mesfin Dasso stated during the opening ceremony today that the airline has produced 6 shift sets of insulation blankets for Boeing 737 aircraft. He claims that the trilateral agreement will make it possible for Ethiopia to produce 726 shift sets over the next 8 or 9 years and provide them to Boeing. There is a significant chance to develop in the region and increase their presence in Ethiopia, according to Alberto Venesuro, Managing Director of Geven Skytechno. Agostino Pales, the ambassador of Italy to Ethiopia, claimed that the opening of an insulation blanket manufacturing facility expands and fortifies Ethiopia and Italy's economic partnership. According to TASO, the aircraft sector will initially benefit from manufacturing the insulation blankets by transferring technologies. It was also said that the primary purpose of aircraft insulation blankets is to protect passengers and crew from engine noise and frigid temperatures at high altitudes. And finally, the UN's General Assembly convened on Wednesday under the theme A Watershed Moment, Transformative Solutions to Interlocking Challenges. African leaders addressed key issues on the continent and the global south at large, including climate justice and the need for true multilateralism. Shagao Yamato presents Ojor David's story.
The UN's General Assembly was convening Wednesday under the theme A Watershed Moment, Transformative Solutions to Interlocking Challenges. African leaders addressed different issues. Kenya's President William Ruto and Nigeria's Buhari were concerned with the climate crisis, explored solutions to financially support nations faced with the conjunction of crisis.
The northern arid and semi-arid rangelands of our country have been gravely impacted by drought, whose severity has not been seen or experienced in 40 years. 3.1 million residents of these atolls are now severely food insecure on account of scarce rainfall over 3 consecutive seasons, leading to poor crop and pasture.
On the second day of the general debate in New York, President Hichilema focused on those bearing the brunt of the impact of the war in Ukraine.
Zambia joins other governments in expressing particular concern about the ongoing war in Ukraine. As we stand with all those affected, both inside Ukraine and in the neighboring countries, we also take this opportunity to stress the far-reaching negative consequences of this war, particularly on the prices of food across the world, fuel, fertilizer, and other key commodities.
Nigerian President Muhammad Buhari emphasized that the continent with the most polluters suffers the least from climate change.
Developing nations produce only a small proportion of greenhouse gas emissions compared to industrialized economies. Yet, we are the hardest hit by the consequences of climate change, as we see in the sustained droughts in Somalia and floods of unprecedented severity in Pakistan.
The 77th UN General Assembly will end on September 26.
You're watching Addis News Hour. Here's a reminder of the stories making headlines. Ethiopia's permanent envoy dismisses the report of the Itri as more of a political statement than a human rights investigation. And TPLF choking Tigray with unconstitutional laws against Tigrayans. And that's all we had for now. I'm Tabitha John. Many thanks for watching. Have a good night and do take care.